Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol character spotlight. I almost said battle report. And today, this week, we are taking a look at Mr. Eddie Brock Venom. And yeah, I think we're gonna just kind of jump right into this. So, start off by saying Venom is one of my favorite models in this game. I have been playing him since very early on in my time with this game, so over a year now. Unfortunately, I haven't been slotting him into as many lists recently as I used to be. Not because I think he's a bad model or anything like that, just because he hasn't really been fitting my game plan the last few times I've been kind of building lists that I've been playing a lot. But I do try to slot him in places where I think he fits well, and I do think there are a handful of those. So yeah, without further ado, we're gonna start out just as we usually do. We'll go through the character card, talk about the affiliations that he belongs in, and then also where else I think he's quite solid, and then we'll just talk about some synergies and things like that. Trying to get the flow of these videos down a little bit so they can be a little bit faster going forward because I know 30-minute videos can be a little long for people, so we'll see what we can do about trimming that down a little bit. So, anyways, we're going to jump right into his stat line here. So, Venom Eddie Brock is a 4 threat. He's going to be walking in with 7 stamina, slow move, and he is a size 3. His defensive line's a little interesting. He's 4-2-3, so there's a very clear weak side and a stronger side there. And on the back, the only change that he actually has is his stamina is dropping down to 6. Otherwise, everything else on his card stays the exact same, so we're not going to talk about that too much here. He has 2 attacks on his card. One of them is a builder. It's Symbiote Tendrils. It's a range 3 builder, which helps make up for his slow speed a little bit. He's going to be throwing 5 dice out. After the attack is resolved, he's going to gain power equal to the damage dealt. And whether you do damage or no triggers or anything like that, after the attack is resolved, he's also going to hand out the bleed condition. So kind of a nice little guaranteed bleed out every time he wants to punch something, which can be really useful. Next he has his spender. It's We Are Venom. It's also range 3, so he kind of has an ideal range he likes to operate at. It's going to be 7 dice, and it's only going to cost you 3 power. After the attack's result, he's going to heal 1 for every damage that he deals. So, nice little way to bring him back up from that, nice health pool of 7 stamina there. So, if your opponent started chipping him down a little bit, you can heal some of it back up. We're going to go into his superpowers next. He's got a handful of superpowers here. He actually has a lot of text on his card. He's got Clintar Rage. It's going to cost him 3 power. He's going to pick a terrain feature or character of size 3 or less within 2, and it's a medium throw. It's going to be only usable once per turn, so he's going to throw a character or terrain feature size 3. Throwing at medium, which is quite good. Yeah, in general, that can be a great control ability. That can be a great damage ability. And it's costing him 3 power, so I think that's roughly standard for those things. But it being medium is really nice, and size 3 as well, of course. Next, he has Web Snare. Push an enemy character within range 4 towards this character medium. Character can be pushed by the superpower only once per turn. This is also costing him 2 power. And notably, this is size unrestricted and pulling medium. This is probably one of the best, like, webline pull style abilities in the game. Because it's also, as you'll notice, a character can be pushed only once per turn, but he can still use it multiple times. So if he has many characters within range 4, he can do it multiple times. It's pulling them a whopping medium. It's really a fantastic ability. Just for control or for bringing things in to play the attrition game, whatever you're using it for, it's really good. So Many Snacks is his next ability. It's a reactive ability. It's going to cost him 2 power. After an attack against this character is resolved, he may use the superpower. If the attacker is within 3, he may make an attack against them. The superpower can be used only once per turn. So this is really interesting. It's allowing him to basically crack back after an attack against him is resolved. Doesn't even care if he was damaged or anything like that. And notably, all of his attacks are range 3, and it doesn't specify which ones. So if you have the power, you can make this a We Are Venom. So after your opponent spent a bunch of time punching you, you can punch them back and heal back some of it with a 7 dice healing attack, I guess. I was about to try and say, like, builder, but, healer, which I guess could be a type of move, but... Um, yeah, that can be a really good crackback ability to kind of help keep him in the game as well as scare people away from attacking him. Next, he has Symbiotic Instincts. When he is attacking, the defending character cannot modify their defense dice, so this is where we kind of see Venom was very clearly made to be a bit of a foil to Spider-Man. where Spider-Man has Spidey sense, which lets him reroll things. Venom's going to say you can't do that. Notably, this also means that they won't benefit from cover, since cover is technically modifying your defense dice. So really, really useful there against characters who like to hide in cover. Honestly, Venom is one of my favorite Rocket and Groot killers because you can web snare them apart from each other, and then symbiotic instincts means Rocket's not even benefiting from cover. So Venom kind of just eats the raccoon up. It's great. Lastly, on his card, he has Wall Crawler, which is a little bit irrelevant with Venom, seeing as he's a small mover anyways, but it comes up on rare occasion where it's super useful, so, I mean, it's not bad, it's just not particularly useful for him. And as I mentioned, the only change on his flip side is he does drop down to 6 stamina from the 7 on his front, so he's got a little less bulk, which means you might get a little less value out of things like So Many Snacks and We Are Venom, but overall still relatively good. He's still on the bulkier side, I think, for fours because of the healing combined with the relatively solid defensive line, with of course the two being a bit of an outlier there. So yeah, overall, Venom has some really good control abilities, some really good kind of defensive slash offensive abilities. And yeah, he's a relatively well-rounded piece. I think his kind of main thing is going to be control at the end of the day. He's got that pull, which is crazy good. And then he's got, of course, the character or terrain throw. So he's capable of punching hard when he needs to because, throwing size 3 terrain or characters can do a lot of damage, and 7 dice attacks can do that as well. But yeah, he also can take a punch pretty well as long as it's not energy. Energy will do very rude things to him, but yeah, in general, I think Venom's a solid, well-rounded piece. He's really, really good at targeting out characters who rely a lot on things like defensive rerolls and things like that. A little less so into characters that have things like damage reductions or just a large amount of dice, which is where their defense comes from. He's less good there, but if they're relying on rerolls, it's a big deal. So into affiliations like Web Warriors and things, he can do a lot of damage. Speaking of affiliations, Venom is a member of two affiliations. He's a member of Spider Foes and Web Warriors. So kind of interesting two affiliations to be a part of since, typically they would be on the opposite sides. So let's talk about those real quick. So Spider Foes, first of all, I think he really, really likes the Green Goblin leadership at the very least, because, I mean, with a crackback, it means he's able to benefit from that leadership even when it's not your turn. So that's kind of extra times you get to use that leadership, which is fantastic. He's a little bit power hungry. 3-2-2 for his superpowers isn't necessarily expensive on paper, but he doesn't have incredible power generation unless he's rolling really well in those builders. And then his 3-cost spender, meaning, on occasion you're going to be wanting to use So Many Snacks as effectively a 5-cost ability. Um, this model can burn through power very, very quickly if you let him. So having having those rerolls to help him build a little bit more power through things like Green Goblin's leadership can be really, really nice. On the flip side, looking at Spider or Web Warriors, well, I don't think he loves Amazing Spider-Man's leadership. He doesn't really have the mobility to be getting up close and personal with opponents' models. I mean, he could pull them towards him, and I mean, it is quite funny to pull someone medium towards you, slow them, and then now they have to, double move to get back wherever they were or something like that. But I don't think it's necessarily amazing. I do like him under that leadership because Amazing Spider-Man tends to play a little bit more brawly and he's more brawly model. But I don't think he's really getting huge benefits from the leadership itself. Although I do think that play well funny is actually probably half decent. I haven't tried it myself, so if you have tried him under Amazing Spider-Man and done that combo, let me know how it goes because that sounds actually kind of interesting. Um, but yeah, the main leadership that most people use for Web Warriors is of course Miles, which is giving you the reroll on defense. And I mean, Venom, I don't think any model really dislikes that leadership. It's a solid leadership for defensive rerolls. If you have the cover, you'll be getting skulls, or you'll be allowed to reroll skulls as well. And I totally just said cover. I mean, if you have an objective, you'll be able to reroll skulls as well. And yeah, I mean, that's quite solid. It makes his 2 defense feel a little less bad, a little bit more consistency there, especially if you're rerolling skulls. And then his 4 defense just becomes, even better. So yeah, I think he's totally fine with either of those leaderships. In general, for the affiliations and their playstyles, I think I prefer him in Spider Foes. Web Warriors has kind of a few other models that they can fill that brawlier role that Venom fills while still kind of keeping up with the rest of the Web Warriors a little bit better. Because, of course, at the end of the day, one of his biggest downsides here is that slow movement speed. Whereas if you compare him directly to someone like Agent Venom here, who is the same amount of threat and has very similar defensive stats and even has the symbiotic instincts, he's of course a medium mover and he's got a web swing. So he's moving around the table a little bit faster. He's keeping up with the rest of the webs a little bit better. So in general, I think for Web Warriors, Agent Venom kind of for their kind of typical playstyle might eke out a little bit of a win there. But if you're going for a more attrition focused Web Warriors, like I said, the Amazing Spider-Man led team, or even a Miles led team that's just trying to punch things, I do think he's really good. And I think if you're playing the mirror match in a webs versus web scenario, Venom is an insanely good piece because he preys on Web Warriors like it's nobody's business. And I mean, for that matter, so does Agent Venom, but honestly, bring both in that matchup, and I think you're not doing yourself a disservice by doing that. So yeah, I think while he might not be Web Warrior's favorite piece in the world, he's definitely not bad there. And I know some people do swear by him because he does bring a lot of control to the table, which is something that Web Warriors likes to do a lot. So he's quite good there. On the flip side, looking at again back to Green Goblin and the Spider Foes, he definitely makes good use of the Green Goblin leadership. Green Goblin generally has a slightly more attrition focused game plan, just looking at the leadership and a lot of the models in the affiliation. Um, so I think Venom benefits a lot from that kind of attrition focused list because he is at the end of the day a very effective attrition piece. With web snare not being just a control thing, but also a way of kind of bringing models into range of your other models. So he can be really, really effective for stuff like that. Outside of his home affiliations, I think Venom is a model that has a lot of potential for turn one plays. Web Snare is one of the kind of first abilities that I really started understanding how valuable turn one plays in this game are. I used to run him under Steve Rogers, Captain America, Steve Rogers, the first one. There's three of them running around now, but the one from the original Corvax who reduces your first superpower by one every turn. I used to run him there as someone who could punish models on the midline by web snaring them in. I always like to tell the story of the time I pulled a Thanos in and I did a bunch of damage to him round one, and then he decided to in round two shove two of my models onto the back line and kind of punished me for it a little bit. So maybe pick your targets wisely. But Venom's definitely a model who can threaten and punish a midline very well. And I mean, even on something like, you don't want to give up too many of your own objectives to do this, but on something like a Montesi or something like that, where your opponent did a semi-safe grab, maybe not like a full, long move away from the point, but a mostly safe grab. You could even double move him up to the middle and pull them forward, so now they can be punished by the rest of your team, even if Venom himself doesn't get to attack them. So he's a good model for doing that sort of thing if you can give him the extra power on turn one. So that would be through means of, like I said, the Corbuck Steve Rogers. Wong would be able to do this as well. You want to power him up kind of, your turn one because again, you're assuming they took the middle extract here, and then he can kind of go and do the things he needs to do the next turn. Advanced R&D, of course, could be used to do this, although typically a lot of times those are being used for other types of plays. I don't think it's a bad idea to pass one to Venom if you can, though. He definitely will make use of it round one, assuming, of course, your opponent leaves anything in range of two short moves in a range four, which I think, Venom, while he is only a short move, he's still a medium base, so that is more mobile than it sounds. Um, so yeah, I think he's a solid target for those sorts of things, and of course other affiliations that are capable of generating you power round one. Things like, for example, I had it a second ago. Inhumans. Inhumans is great for him, gives him a little bit of power there, and also another reason why I like both Inhumans and Steve Rogers is because, like I mentioned, he can kind of be power hungry throughout the entire game, and Steve is actually huge for him. I mean, web snares for one, so many snacks for one, which is only once per turn anyways, and it's reactive, so you're benefiting when it's not your turn. And I mean, I already kind of mentioned the value of that with Green Goblin's leadership, and I think the same thing can be said with Steve Rogers. Inhumans is obviously great for powering him up. The only thing with Inhumans is there might be other models you'd kind of prefer to shift power towards. So again, not quite as keen on him there, but in general, I think he's really good with a lot of these different things. I mean, I used to run him in Midnight Suns as well because there I had Wong to power him up for the turn ones. And then as the game dragged on, he'd have access to Bump in the Night to help him with his mobility issues a little bit. So, keep him in that range 4 so we can pull things in and then go to town on them because when this model gets to kind of start rolling when he's double tapping you and he's trying to target your models that rely on rerolls and stuff like that, so he's probably getting good damage through because they're obviously not able to do that with him. He's doing some serious work and he could do a lot of damage if you're putting him in the right places and targeting the right models with him. So yeah, I think there's a handful of affiliations that really appreciate a Venom, and Venom really appreciates them, and those are just kind of scratching the surface. I'm sure there's others, but those are some of my personal favorites. I love them in those above affiliations more than anywhere else, I think. I like personally my favorite place to play Venom is Avengers still, but yeah, overall, I think he can slot into most rosters. You just have to kind of be mindful that his turn one plays are very reliant on a little extra power generation, and he's going to be power hungry most of the game. So if you don't have a way to deal with that, then you can hope to roll good with him, I guess. I mean, if he's getting one attack, he should still be hopefully generating enough for something like a web snare. So if he can web snare once per turn and make a 5 dice auto bleed attack, that's not terrible value because the web snare can be, that's just a secure that your opponent's no longer contesting, or maybe even now you're scoring it even better. Or again, a model that, has an extract that you need to kill, you've now pulled forward so you can have the rest of your team wail on it. So he has a lot of versatility with that sort of ability. Next, we're going to talk about tactics cards for Mr. Venom here, and Venom only comes with one tactics card, and it is Lethal Protector. So, Lethal Protector here, when an enemy character targets an allied character within 3 of an allied Venom, he may spend 2 to play this card. You place him within 1 of the allied character, and he becomes the target of the attack regardless of range and line of sight. So, I mean, card is relatively straightforward. It's basically a range 3 bodyguard that you get to do once per game, but you're going to place yourself beside them. So, on paper, this card doesn't sound incredibly amazing because, I mean, it's just a once per game bodyguard when, a lot of characters have bodyguard just written on their own card. But because it's Venom, it's actually really, really good. First of all, obviously, you want to pick your targets for that card relatively carefully. If it's a high dice energy attack, maybe not something you want to throw Venom into, although maybe sometimes that's worth it, right? Um, but if you can throw him in front of something that's like a physical attack or something, especially if it's a lower dice one, you can use that to then, maybe take a damage or two. Who cares? Because if you're playing this, you probably want to be doing it in a situation where you have the power to then go so many snacks, we are Venom, and just heal it right back up, and maybe deal a bunch of damage or even take down one of their characters on their turns. And if you get the opportunity to do that, it can be super huge. Maybe their model survived on 1 health and you really wanted it taken down that turn. So they're activating with it right away because they want to, make sure it gets an activation in, and then you lethal protector so many snacks their first attack, and it's just like, well, their model is now down, and Venom has healed all of the things that their model did, so you might as well just gotten it on your turn at that point. Because if anything, now their activation has benefited you, right? In addition, of course, it is just a bodyguard as well, so, maybe Venom doesn't have an objective and the model that's about to die does, or maybe Venom's already activated and the model that's about to die hasn't. So Venom jumps in front of them and Venom will take the hit, and sometimes that's worth sacrificing Venom for, depending on the situation. Obviously, he is a 4 threat, so you don't want to just throw him away, but It's a versatile bodyguard. It's a very useful bodyguard because you can use it to get some extra damage on your opponent. You can use it to protect one of your own models. Fantastic card. I personally really like it. Of course, you could just play something like Sacrifice as well, but that's taking up one of your restricted thought slots. It's only range 2. Of course, it is less predictable because obviously Sacrifice can be played between any two models, whereas Lethal Protector is always coming from Venom. But personally, if I'm running Venom, Lethal Protector is almost an auto include. I just think it's such a good card, and Venom really is a model that's capable of abusing that card. So yeah, I think that's great for him. Other tactics cards for Venom, honestly, I can't really think of much. I mean, I mentioned Advanced R&D earlier as a way of kind of passing him some power in the earlier turns of the game, and I don't hate that for him. I don't think it's necessarily necessary. Just kind of looking by character, I think he is involved in a couple others. So obviously those two are Agent Venom, but he does have uneasy allies with Peter Parker. During their activations, when Spider-Man or Venom targets an enemy character with an attack that is within range 2 of the other allied character, both characters may suffer 1 damage to play this card. You add 3 dice to the attack roll. So if you're playing Amazing Spider-Man, or even the new Spectacular Spider-Man. Oh no, actually neither of those are Spider-Man. This has to be either Miles or Corbox Peter. What am I talking about? If you're playing Miles or Corbox Peter, this could come up on occasion. I don't think it's going to come up incredibly often. A lot of the times you're not wanting to take the damage, but it isn't a bad way of getting some extra dice on one of Venom's, healing attacks or something like that. It is important that it's during their own activation, so you can't have Venom do this on one of his crackback attacks to really benefit from that extra healing. And you are taking damage to play it, so it can be a little bit risky, and I don't think any of the Spider-Mans really love taking damage when they don't have to. So in general, I find I don't bring this card very often, hence why I was mixing up which Spider-Mans it can be used on. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad card. If you are fielding a Spider-Man and Venom together, it's possibly worth having in the 10 if you have some slots that you're not sure what you want to do with. But I don't think it's an auto include by any means, whereas I do think Lethal Protector is at least an auto include in the 10 if you have Venom, maybe not necessarily in the 5 that you're actually bringing. So yeah, I think Uneasy Allies is a fine card, but probably not one that you're needing to bring every game. So yeah, I don't think he really cares too strongly about many other cards. I mean, he's a decent patch-up target because he does have a decent health pool and he does have things like crackback, so he's a little bit more annoying for your opponent to punch. So when they finally do have him low, if you can just bring him back up to a good amount of health, that's always nice. But otherwise, I don't think you're really getting anything too crazy on him. Similarly, I don't think I mentioned this in the last video actually, but Crises, I don't think he really has a crazy preferred favorite. I did mention I like him on things like Montesi, especially now that it's not energy anymore. Um, Montesi is decent for him. I don't think it's necessarily his favorite. Honestly, I think he's a relatively versatile model and can play well on pretty much anything. I don't love him on D shapes just because he doesn't really have the mobility to kind of rotate between them. So if he's playing on a D shape, he's kind of sticking to one and not really leaving it. But that's not necessarily terrible because he does have tools like the web pull to kind of keep targets near him and stuff like that. So I don't think it's unplayable for him by any means, but yeah, I think in general he's just not really super picky about the type of map that he's on. He's pretty capable of playing on most of them, I would think. I think he does have a bit of a preference towards, F's, maybe C's, kind of stuff that has a center point that he can chill on and still interact with some of the other points on the board, I think are kind of his preferred things, which again, I don't mind him on E's by any means. I'm a little hesitant to put him on something like Demons because Incinerate isn't his favorite thing, and same for Mayor Fisk because Stun isn't his favorite thing, but otherwise, I think he can pretty much play anywhere relatively decently. So yeah, there's not much more to go on there. So then I guess the next thing is just general um, kind of drawbacks and synergies and things. And I mean, I already talked a little bit about synergies with some leaderships and stuff like that. I think personally, I've had a lot of success running Venom in kind of bodyguard brick style lists with things like Luke Cage and Heroes for Hire, or Iron Fist, of course, as well for Heroes for Hire. I already mentioned I like him under Original Steve, who's also a bodyguard. There's a handful of really good bodyguards in the game right now, and I think it can be really fun between Lethal Protector, Heroes for Hire, and then just having natural bodyguards on a couple of the characters in your list to kind of have your opponent not really have a choice in which models they're targeting, so you always kind of get that final say. And then the really fun part of that comes where, you now also are adding a crackback into the mix with all of this. So like they're not really getting a choice on which models they're targeting, and when you get to choose for them, it can potentially be really painful for them. So I think he can be really fun in those types of lists. I don't know if it's necessarily a synergy for him, but it's definitely a fun thing for him. Similarly, I think anything that can help kind of keep him alive, because while he does have a decent defensive line and he does have healing, he doesn't really have any dice modification for his defensive line. So at the end of the day, 4 dice can still blank out relatively easily. 2 dice can definitely blank out. So giving him some models that might give him some defensive rerolls or even adding extra dice. I mean, I talked about him in Midnight Sun, so something like Doctor Strange or, Amazing Spider-Man, obviously. Witty banter is going to help keep him alive, that sort of thing. I think those are solid for him. Not necessary, but they don't hurt in any way. So yeah, I think he appreciates having a few of those types of models sitting around that can kind of help manage that a little bit more for him. So I guess the next thing to talk about would be kind of weaknesses for Mr. Venom here. And I mean the glaring one is just that 2 energy defense. You really got to be careful with who this model is going into and who he's getting punched by. It's another reason why I kind of like him in that kind of bodyguard brick style list is like, when Rocket Raccoon's up and he's about to shoot you 3 times with, 5 dice energy, turns out that'll kill a Venom. And if he's beside a Groot, so many snacks isn't really going to help you there. So having a way to kind of deflect some of those shots off of Venom is kind of important to just kind of help keep him alive. Um, but yeah, it's one of those situations where honestly, if you're playing against Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe Venom just doesn't hit the table because they have so many energy attacks. And that can kind of be said for anyone who's throwing out a lot of energy attacks. It's kind of his biggest problem in the meta right now, I think, is that he's very, very vulnerable to those. So it's unfortunate, but it kind of hurts him a lot because he really doesn't have great defensive tech against, especially if it's energy attacks that can hit him from range 4. He doesn't really have any great way of dealing with that, aside from, of course, just, on his turn going and killing them first. So he definitely struggles in those types of scenarios, and kind of the best things I can suggest if you're adamant on playing him and he does get paired off against an energy attacker is just try to keep something like a bodyguard nearby him just to shave off some of those attacks and hopefully then have Venom just kind of deal with them on his turn, because he's very capable of dealing a good amount of damage when his turn does come around. And if you let him take an energy attack or two before you bodyguard, and that's one of the great things about running bodyguards is you can kind of decide when enough is enough on a model that has 7 health. You can usually take 1 or 2 hits all right. So you can let him build up all this power, and then when his turn comes around, he's going to be throwing 7 dicers that are healing him, and hopefully he can kind of be back in a pretty healthy state by the end of that round. So for that matter, also models that have healing. I already mentioned Doctor Strange and Wong, but I think both of them are solid with him for that reason as well. So yeah, I think just in general, those are kind of the things that he appreciates having. But I think that is going to do it for this character spotlight. I don't really have specific, individual character synergies or anything to talk about for him. He doesn't really have anything too specific that he cares about, other than, of course, Spider-Man for the tactics card. Um, so yeah, that's gonna do it for our boy Venom here. In general, we have a really, really tanky model with solid output, really, really good control, like fantastic control. I mean, Web Snare is amazing. Clintar Rage is a very solid character or terrain throw. So excellent control in this model. Really interesting crackback, especially when combined with his tactics card, and a way of kind of turning off your opponent's defensive mods. So Venom brings a lot to the table. He's a really powerful model. He's just kind of a model that you have to know where and when to apply him because he can definitely just die if you're not careful with him, especially against energy based teams such as Guardians of the Galaxy, which of course are very relevant in the meta right now. So yeah, I think overall though, Venom is a fantastic model. I definitely recommend if you haven't had a chance to play around with him, definitely try him out in a few places because he can bring a lot to a lot of different teams. If you have any synergies or strategies that you like to do with your Venom that I didn't get to cover in this video because maybe I haven't discovered them myself, feel free to drop a comment down below. Tell me your Venom stories. I would love to hear them. And of course, for anyone else watching the video, go check out anything anyone said in the comments because I mean, I'm not going to claim to know everything about every character. So, yeah, hopefully you guys have seen success with them, or if you're just watching this video to start out with them, come back and let me know how your first few games go and stuff like that. That would be awesome to see. But I think that is going to do it for what I have to say on Mr. Venom here. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please do drop a like down below. I really appreciate the support. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. I'm starting to try and get ahead on some of these character spotlights and things, so hopefully these are going to be a very consistent thing going forward. And of course, we do also do battle reports, usually on Sundays, typically either every Sunday or every other Sunday. So we have a few exciting ones coming up the month of October. So hopefully you guys enjoy those when they hit. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. So thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day. Peace.